Well guys, the US government finally decided to step in and do something about the biggest problem plaguing our country. And no, I'm not talking about the abundance of sugar that's being put into every piece of fast food leading to an obesity epidemic. No, I'm not talking about inflation raising to all-time highs, making it impossible for you to purchase a vehicle, a place to live, or even the groceries that you need to be able to eat every day. I'm also not talking about raising the wages so that people aren't paid the same amount of money per hour that they were in 2003, or doing anything about firearms getting into the hands of children, bringing them to school. No, I'm talking about something much more serious. Funny cat videos on your phone.
Nuts! I'm gonna be honest with you, everybody's talking about this TikTok ban stuff. I think I'd rather the Chinese know my address and everything about me rather than the US government. What does the government even do?
Step 1 to the end of vertical video is complete. We spent all this time making fun of the UK for banning online cyberbullying, and now it's happening here at home. The House of Representatives just moved to pass a bill that would make it so that ByteDance, the company that owns TikTok, as well as like a tremendous amount of other apps, would be unable to continue to own TikTok over the course of the next 6 months, and if they don't decide to give up the company to something that's US owned, then it would be banned outright. TikTok has already moved to say that they will not be selling the company, which means if this goes through, TikTok just goes by, but it does still need to get approved by the Senate and then by Sleepy Joe himself before we actually see it come to fruition.
This is not an attempt to ban TikTok. It's an attempt to make TikTok better. Tic-tac-toe. A winner. A winner.
TikTok has been dubbed as Chinese spyware by basically anybody who's taken a deeper dive into the actual way that the app works. It collects a lot of data, as do most apps on your phone, but because of the nature of it being owned primarily by a Chinese company, has made a lot of people feel unwell about having it on their phone. The US government actually has it so that most federal agents and most people working for the government aren't allowed to have TikTok on their phone whatsoever because they have concerns about backdoor security breaches and just in general America not having the sorts of access to the app the way that they would with Facebook and Instagram. It doesn't adhere to the same privacy notifications that a US-owned app would have, and so they have security concerns, which is fair. But what about my cat videos?
With every second that passes, you are becoming more and more loyal to the People's Republic of China. All hail the People's Republic of China. We love our strong leader. The Red Book was spitting facts.
Now keep in mind, I'm not a lawyer, I'm not even a dude who reads articles past the headlines, so take everything I say with a bit of salt, but my understanding about the entire situation that people have beef with when it comes to the banning of TikTok basically boils down to the same situation we had with the Net Neutrality Act back in 2015, where it was sort of advertised and pushed through the government and the Senate in a way that sort of described it as something that would be good for the people, open up the ability for major companies to fast lane the internet and what have you. But what it really was just a thinly veiled way for big companies to be able to censor parts of the internet at whim and without regulation. And naturally, even though it was advertised as something that would be better, it would overall lead to an internet that would be governed by those who decide what you can and should share with each other. The same sentiment is kind of being echoed about TikTok, whereas it seems like the entirety of the US government and those in the Senate are speaking as if this app is something that is designed to do nothing but collect your data, sell it to the Chinese, and then result in, again, I don't know, blowing up your house, throwing you out a window. I don't really know what the end goal here would be for the Chinese other than selling you funny shit on Temu, which is an app that's not currently being blocked by the government, mind you. But for those of us in the US that are actually using the app, it's difficult to see it as anything other than a replication of something like Instagram or Facebook. People use it to share cooking videos, teach people how to play video games, show highlights and clips from your favorite Twitch streamers and YouTubers. I mean, people use it as an entertainment source. It hasn't exactly taken over our lives other than the fact that we spend a bunch of time in it. What's the big concern?
The TikTok ban is crazy because they're talking about, oh, China's taking our data, but the thing is most of us have unlimited data anyway.
The main conversation that's currently occurring about people talking about the ban of TikTok isn't so much the fact that they're losing their favorite app or whatever, but the complete disconnect between the fact that the US government is moving to ban this as if it's the #1 threat to national security, and most people's use of the app as something that they just use as entertainment. Why is this the thing that's taking priority over what everybody is talking about? This is the most dangerous thing that we need to be focusing all of our time and attention on? Most people in America, and I don't have a poll on this, are pretty fine with TikTok. It's the app that their kids use to communicate with each other and express themselves creatively, share memes with their parents and what have you, and there's plenty of examples of people learning how to read, learning how to cook, watching my YouTube video shorts, on TikTok. And so, this disconnect between the people of America and the representatives that are supposed to be representing the people of America having completely differing views on the app, one trying to ban it outright and the other one using it on a daily basis, that has led to people wondering why the people representing us are so disconnected with what the people they're representing actually want. And this is no better represented anywhere than a video from a year ago when the president of TikTok, Shou, met with different representatives from the states of the United States of America, where they were supposed to be asking him questions to try and enlighten themselves on what TikTok is, how it's used, and whether or not it is a threat to national security, but instead turned into numerous members of Congress, or rather members of senators from states in the United States, just demonizing the guy and doing their best to try and call him Chinese despite the fact that he's from Singapore.
Of what nation are you a citizen?
Singapore.
Are you a citizen of any other nation?
No, Senator.
Have you ever applied for Chinese citizenship?
Senator, I served my nation in
asking-
Singapore. No, I did not.
Do you have a Singaporean passport?
Yes, and I served my military for two and a half years in Singapore.
Do you have any other passports from any other nations?
No, Senator.
Have you ever been a member of the Chinese Communist Party?
Senator, I'm Singaporean. No.
Have you ever been associated or affiliated with the Chinese Communist Party?
No, Senator. Again, I'm
Okay.
Singaporean.
If you guys didn't watch the video from that interaction, I highly recommend it, and I'll link it down in the description. Mr. Shou does an excellent job at answering all the questions, parsing aside anything that they were asking that was ridiculous, and doing a good job at representing the full intentions of TikTok as a company to operate and adhere to any requirements that the US had outside of, well, you just can't be owned by a Chinese company, point blank. They would move to follow all privacy concerns, they would store all user data locally, wherever they want in the US, adhere to all rules, and yet everybody who was talking to him was just speaking as if the only goal that he had in mind was to try and spy on US citizens. And it really made the US senators look pretty silly. That's the main takeaway from the entirety of this video, is most people felt like the people that were representing us and trying to ban TikTok, it took away the shroud of like, hey, the senators and the government, they all know best. If they say it's a bad thing, then we should just follow whatever they say, and really made it seem like they were just trying to get rid of this app because it wasn't bringing in money to the US, and they would prefer if it was. I know it seems silly to base an opinion on something that's probably like a tremendous amount of legislation and legal jargon that you need to read to understand the full grasp of, but I personally feel like this interaction between the president of TikTok and the representatives of the United States of America, like 50-something people in a room that are supposed to be asking him questions to better understand the situation, are instead spending the entirety of their time just trying to use the word China as many times as possible to try and demonize the intentions of an app that doesn't operate any differently than something like Facebook or Instagram that all are owned by the US and do exactly the same thing and yet adhere to the same rules that TikTok does. It's not like TikTok's getting free leeway and getting away with stuff that Instagram and Facebook can't do simply because it's owned by China. If anything, it's doing less because it isn't owned by the US. I think this is exemplified by the fact that they're moving to pass this bill in a way that would allow TikTok to sell the company, or its US version of the company, to a US owned company, which means like, in the end goal, the US government would be completely fine with TikTok simply if it wasn't owned by the Chinese government in one way or another. Which, like, are we upset at the app and the way that it works, and is it a problem or is it not? We already have companies like Instagram/Facebook that already collect all the user data in the world, and we've just accepted that as like a part of life. I could say dog food once near my phone and I'll get advertisements for dog food on Instagram. I don't even have a dog. I've got 2 cats. I think the biggest issue that people have with this is the precedent that it's going to set in terms of what the government can control when it comes to free speech on the internet, effectively. If the only thing this was banning a single app that they found problematic, that'd be one thing, but that isn't ever what these things end up being. In reality, the legislative notes and the way that this is written would make it so that they could ban other stuff simply because the US government doesn't have their hands all over it. Technically speaking, the way that the bill is written is it would also disallow the use of VPNs, and who knows what else in the long term. If there's going to be something that the US government wants to be able to get rid of on the internet, it's going to be possible now. And I think that's really the biggest thing and the biggest piece of conversation that should really be occurring. If TikTok is such a threat simply because it doesn't have to adhere to US censorship, well then what does that say about our access to the internet? what does that say about anybody's ability to pull up their phone, say something about it, and then reach millions of people? I have seen so many posts on TikTok that have been, I had a bad experience with an airline, a hotel, a medical pharmacy, or whatever, that has resulted in real change and companies being held accountable for their shit actions. And I feel like that alone should be an amount of power that the average person should have access to, just so that their lives aren't as shit. At best, it's the US government being ahead of the curve, identifying that TikTok is Chinese spyware, and making a move to get it off of US citizens' phones before anything problematic happens. But in reality, it feels like TikTok isn't anything different than something like Instagram, Facebook, or Twitter. It's just a different flavor of the choice that the average person decides to use to voice their opinions on matters that they feel are important to them. It's a public forum in video format, just like most anything else is. What makes it so different to something like YouTube, Twitter, or Facebook? And in my opinion, if the only concern is that the app is owned by a Chinese company and you want to ban it because of that, making it so that the only way that TikTok can exist is if there's a US version of it specifically for this country, isn't that what China already does with their stuff? I'll reiterate that I am not the most knowledgeable when it comes to these lengthy legislative movements that are like pages and pages long and are relatively vague, and you have to basically be a lawyer in order to understand. You've got some ordinary gamers for that. I just feel like if this is a move and this is a precedent that we're going to set, it feels like stuff that we've already dealt with in the past, like with net neutrality, and it has never been a good thing. It has always felt like a way for the US government to try and backdoor, pilot one little ship of, hey, this thing's bad and we got to get rid of it, and then there's a whole bunch of ships behind it that's like, oh, also, no more VPNs, and also Netflix won't let you take screen grabs, and also GTA 6 is never coming out. And it's like, fuck, man. Let me know down in the comments how you guys feel about the matter, whether you think it moving or passing is going to be a pro or a con in the long run. But I do want you guys to keep in mind that if they ban TikTok, that means we all got to use YouTube Shorts. That's not a future I want to live in. Peace.
Good. Come on. Oi.